Okay, guys, we're back. Today I'm doing a book review for you of Theresa McWhirter's 2012 novel, Five Little Bitches. McWhirter there. This is a really excellent novel, frankly. I think it's McWhirter's best work. She's a local Gen X author, lives in East Vancouver. Background on Vancouver Island and in the interior, Kootenays. And she has a very particular style, which I want to talk about, and method, and a little bit about the career as well. And of course, I'll review the book as we go through that. So just to start off, like I said, a little bit about McWhirter. She's the author of, as of this recording, 5 novels now, actually. She's got a new one coming out this year, which is called Capper. Really looking forward to that. It's been 14 years since she did this 2012 novel, The Five Little Bitches. But McWhirter got a career started doing a book called Some Girls Do, which I read on Kindle ebook, so I don't have a copy of it, but excerpts from that were published in this kind of poetry and novelization anthology, Hammer and Tongs. And you can see she has some of the small components of that written in this book, Some Girls Do. Now, that was in 2002, if I recall correctly, after which it was a bit of a break. She published a young adult novel, a very short story here called Skank. You're probably beginning to notice the theme here. And this is definitely young adult style, but has the same classic, if you will, McWhirter, profanity and transgression themes. And then in 2011, 2012, she published these 2 novels. So the first was Dirtbags, and this is a quintessential downtown east side, East Vancouver, drug addiction, women, subaltern novel. And then right after that, The Five Little Bitches. So not the most prolific career, but so far, but she has a, again, very unique style and method, which is something I want to talk about a little bit more. So one of, and she reminds me of a lot of authors as well, and others have commented on this. Sort of the way to set this up, I think it's actually in the cover of this. Yeah, here. Saying, this is ABC Book World. These are not the young, hip, irony-driven quipsters from Douglas Coupland novels, biding their time, hoping for elevation into a higher level of consumerism, yuppies, if you will. McWhirter's generation of urban drifters are jumping over the edge of despair into pits of self-destruction. Romance is a luxury they can't afford. I think that sums it up very well. The style, especially going back to Some Girls Do, which has, again, almost a poetic style and structure to it, and definitely a short story kind of component that jumps around a little bit, is, I think, quite reasonably enough inspired by Hemingway. You'll certainly recognize the, no excessive verbose, no verbiage, really stripped down style, and, likes to, have enough word. This is a critical kind of a Cormac McCarthy style, actually, is to have enough word variation, tone variation, that the stories, the novels never feel like they're exhausted. There's always, just reading it in a prose sense, you're always going to get something a little fresh, a little new, and the word choices and dialogue as well certainly convey that. So a good, really sound, solid background there. Now, the Coupland connection, I think, is relevant. It's worth talking about. You can't really discuss Vancouver or Pacific Northwest novelizations without discussing Coupland. As that ABC Book World reviewer pointed out, Coupland is much more interested in, as is his wont, the art scene, yuppies, and a more materialistic group of people than the junkies on the downtown east side, if you will. But there are certainly some parallels, and one of them I noticed very clearly in The Five Little Bitches is the use of these kind of mini biographies in the book. I'll talk more about this, what the look and feel of the book in a second here, but notice this bio here. So that is a thing that Coupland did very successfully in his novel Microserfs from the early 90s. And I have used this technique myself, I might add, and it's very effective, which is when you're constructing the novel, you're planning things out and you're working on the characters, one of the things you're going to do very likely is have notes about the characters' motivations and their background, and details like who are their favorite bands, where did they go to school, what TV shows did they like, who are their favorite musicians, stuff like that. And that can be inserted. You can find ways to insert that information into the novel. It's difficult and kind of artificial to do it by dialogue entirely. So one technique that Coupland uses in Microserfs is in his case, he uses the Jeopardy board as the formula. So then he puts in the categories as clearly these notations he'd constructed of the characters. So McWhirter does the same thing in this case. So she has, for each of the major characters, there's 5 major characters, but 4 who are really critical, who get these chapters basically dedicated to their backgrounds, and that they're set up with those miniature biographies. And it reminds me of Chumbawamba's album Tub Thumper, because in the cover flap for that, they pretend that the band is a football team, and so they have what each person in the band, what would be their starting position in the football lineup, that kind of thing. So there's a number of different, from a methodological perspective, there's a number of different ways you can use those notes, notations, and character references to quickly convey information to the reader, which is then helpful because you can flip back very quickly to one page and learn something about the character. Now, so to go into why that's important, what this story is about. McWhirter, who it's also mentioned is kind of inspired by some Candace Bushnell and Eva Bennett's, it's obviously women centered, chick lit, if you will. Although the style is different in that she's like this Hemingway-esque kind of stripped downness. Not to mention, I think, reminds me of Martin Amis, like early Martin Amis work. So again, McWhirter, I'm all over the place here. McWhirter is very interested in youth culture and in the Pacific Northwest. That's another Coupland important component of that. So something that Coupland often does is the environment, location is very important, and the location almost becomes a part of the story. McWhirter does that as well. So there's this subaltern underground component, which is important from the other, rock album, almost gonzo journalism style that authors like Hunter Thompson and Tom Wolfe and others mastered very well. So McWhirter is she's kind of pulling all that together. Now, like I said, the Bushnell thing is like Coupland in that regard. Bushnell's interest is not so much on the subaltern. She's really interested in materialism and cataloging the nature of, in that case, American city, New York materialism, which McWhirter is not so much interested in. But if you go read this is the Bushnell thing. If you read the Carey Diaries, which is these 2 books, one is Summer in the City by Bushnell, and the other is I think it's just called the Carey Diaries, which are fantasizations about the character Carrie Bradshaw that Bushnell created for the Sex and the City journal, newspaper articles. But one of the things that she does is she likes to have characters that have, just like they're known by simple short names that are often, archetypal names. So the names describe the character in some way. Tom Wolfe did this a lot as well. And then again, also the city connection is important. The urban setting is really significant. But with the Coupland thing, getting out of the city also matters. Coupland has a lot of, especially in Shampoo Planet, if I recall, there's a component where they go up to a commune in the north, Haida Gwaii area, and so getting out of the city has something that's just as significant as the environment of being in the city, and McWhirter does that as well. So I was gonna, like I said, sort of wanted to get some background there. I was gonna back up a little bit and talk about the novel Dirtbags. So McWhirter wrote, this was published in 2011, and then Five Little Bitches was published a year later. So obviously she didn't write these within a year, and I know from the information provided in the Five Little Bitches that the research must have taken place a couple of years before that. So she was probably, had these projects underway, and they have some important similarities. So the thing, and this again has a Bushnell connection, one of the things that's most significant for McWhirter is the interaction between groups of women, often women who are living together in kind of dingy, again, downtown east side type environments, or hostels, things like this. So back alleys are really important, and drug dens, and the dealers they're connecting with, and their numerous boyfriends, of course, and the punk rock bands, bars they're going to. So in Dirtbags, which the protagonist is character Spider, there's a reference to the naming component that Bushnell utilizes. This is like a deep dive into, it's a character study, but there's also several other women characters. One of them is named Blue, for example, who they're, the thing that really seems to be McWhirter's jam is the interaction between these groups of women, and the women have, are like different types of archetypes, and they have quite different characterizations which evolve through the course of the novel. And in the Dirtbags, there is a brilliant point in this where about halfway through the novel she stops the main narrative and then goes back and tells you the entire, it's like for several chapters long, the entire backstory of the Spider character, like youth growing up, family, the things that happened to her, numerous boyfriends, and so on. And that really blew my mind when I read it, because it like completely changed my perspective on the stuff I had read earlier. This is something that I've noticed in McWhirter, and it comes out very clearly in the Five Little Bitches. You can read the beginnings of them as like discrete, again, almost short story like anecdotes, that are very specific, clearly probably inspired by real life characters and so on. But then they evolve, and you want to know more about the characters. So you of course, when you're reading at the beginning, you're not completely cognizant of what the importance of certain events and so on. So one of the things that she does very well is it forces you to go back and look at the beginning again, and to see what where these characters come from. And it was funny to me, because when I was reading reviews of the Five Little Bitches, something that people were complaining about, strangely enough, was that they thought there was like an unevenness of it, and they preferred, either I liked the first bit more, I preferred the second bit more, and some of the characters seemed similar at the beginning, but they were different at the end. And I'm sure that was, like I said, people are complaining about that, but I think that was done intentionally and constructed very carefully so that you would go back and reread them, which I did. And it made, of course, like your perspective changes completely, and you hit on things that you missed at the beginning, and that really gives it almost like in video games you'd say replayability. So the books have, again, they have this like evolution to them that is intelligently designed, so not just random comportments of scenes, but that fit together very nicely, in fact, as a complete whole. So what is this book about? You're wondering at this point, I'm sure. I dropped these literary references. So Five Little Bitches is a story about, basically, like I say, 5 characters. They are Rosie, Maxine, Fanta, Kitty, and Squeaky. And these are these 5 women who are working for, variously involved. They have interesting backgrounds, like either their culinary industry or the hippies, again, that Coupland, kind of commune component of it, or musicians, or they're just like punk rockers, and they're kind of connected by this the punk rock scene in Vancouver, the bars that they're going to, and like the jobs that they're working. One of which is this Freudian Slips, it's called, which is like this is a classic kind of downtown East Side, East Vancouver trope, which is the like antique shop / bookstore / board game emporium / fashion / vinyl record outlet, so it's a like an odd shop, right? An auditorium, I think, is what Ripley would say, believe it or not. So they're all connected by that, and then what they do, of course, is, since this is it's a rock novel, it's a punk rock novel, they form, eventually they start living together, like in Dirtbags, about women living together, and they form, and in some girls do, and they form a band. And then the band has its, they start producing music, and they have a really crazy style, and they all have these unique, things that they do. And this is, of course, the class. This is like the bread and butter McWhirter stuff. It's crazy, and they form a band and they go on tours and stuff happens to them. We'll talk more about that in a second. But so I mentioned so that's the narrative structure of the story. But and it combines all of the classic McWhirter stuff you would like if you're into this, which is one of the critical things that she does, and she does very, very well, is the descriptions of parties and how those happen, and like the madness that takes place at those, all the booze and the drugs and the boys and the rock music and the fights, all the madness, right? So when I started the novel, I immediately was like, okay, this is classic McWhirter. They're doing is partying, and their lives are these like hedonistic bacchanal gong shows, right? And I enjoy that, so that was fine for me. And however, I thought, yeah, she's very good at it, but she's sort of done it better. And some of it was a little played out. Like some of the party descriptions I thought in Dirtbags were better, and even in Some Girls Do as well. So it almost felt like it was played out a little bit in that regard. But I didn't know what to expect. I knew it was going to be about this band eventually forming, but that's just like a slow boil. I would say that takes 100 pages or so really before they get that underway, and she takes several chapters to set up the characters. So I definitely, and like I said, people have commented on, I preferred one part of the book to the other part, but so definitely the beginning was like vintage McWhirter, and the characterization, and she has this way of doing, again, like I said, male-female relationships, which is brilliant, where the men are just like, they just come in and out, and they have, you'd think like, oh, maybe, you don't know, she leaves you in suspense. Is this guy going to be a character? Is he going to disappear? Because so many of them, and they all have crazy names, Rocket and Sparrow and Tony King and Eddie, they have these great, but so you never know, like, are they going to be fixtures in this novel, or are they just going to be like in one scene and then disappear, which happens all the time. And so that, again, gives it a spontaneity, which is enjoyable. But first half, like vintage McWhirter in that regard. Like I said, second half is definitely, I will say, I think is the better half, but because it's so true to life. And I have to talk about that, when they start, the band gets underway and they start, there's like a mission now, and they're a team, and there's like obviously frictions within the team, and some of the characters start to really like stand out in that regard, because they take on, they become no longer just the classic McWhirter-esque archetypes, but they become, through the events, through the action, of course, the telling it, they become these really compelling people, and you care about them, and you want to know more about them and what's going to happen to them, and they go off on different directions, and so that works very, very well. Also, and this is important, you read in the acknowledgments that this is no joke. So McWhirter says she would like to thank Derek von Essen for the sick book design. Like I said, I mentioned that the construction of this is quite cool, and then she also wants to thank the Real Mackenzies for letting me tag along on tours. And so I'm pretty certain that in like the 2011-2010 timeframe, she was touring with the Real Mackenzies, because some of the stuff in this, a friend of mine, bizarrely enough, was right after that period became a drummer for, this is Pinner, so if you're Pinner and you're watching this, sir, became a drummer for the Real Mackenzies. So I can confirm that these events are quite true to life. And so that the research that went into this is legit, and again has this like gonzo journalism style, like it's the tour diary, but a fictionalized tour diary, which is impressive. But that part of the novel, that second half of the novel, is the, like, for me, was the standout, really impressive part, because it's again so believable and true to life and insane, and it goes to the next level. And this thing that McWhirter she had a problem with that, I thought, in the previous novels, because they tended to become like sentimentalized. So once you're done, with the parties, you've blown all that, and the madness has taken place. Where do you go from there? The hedonism, and McWhirter's, because of the, like, I think again, Coupland, Hemmingway, inspiration, she has a tendency to want to sentimentalize the characters a little bit, which is natural. You do that. You like your characters, and you want to find out what happens to them, and hopefully things work out well for them. Though you never know in McWhirter. But this took it in a different direction because it was based on this, like, the Real Mackenzies, this Canadian Celtic rock band. Those guys are nuts too. Like, tour experience that McWhirter had. She was able to avoid some of that sentimentalization, although she does do it, of course. In the end, it has. And this is again very Coupland-esque. It has to. You want it to wrap up with some kind of happy ending, maybe. It was again deviation a little bit from the previous novel, Dirtbags. Don't want to spoil that, although it is kind of spoiled on the back cover. Anyway, so real life, true experience there, very believable, and I would recommend these two pieces of work by another colleague of mine, Daragh Markham, who is a British, Scottish, journalist type, who is the bassist for an insane thrash metal band, Inhuman Nature. And so he has written a fictionalized story about that experience, Dog Shit and Cancer, Selected Grievances. Daragh, very good work. And then he has a series of these Inhuman Nature Heavy Steel tour diaries. And so again, this is how I know that McWhirter's not fooling you, because the madness is thoroughly documented by my colleague Daragh. So true to life, and that really takes the story to the next level. The parties become so crazy, it just turns into I'm reminded of J. McInerney's Story of My Life, which is a fictionalized novel about a young woman in New York, and it's just where in the end you can't even tell, the days just blend together, and it's so insane that the lack of sleep and the drinking and the boozing, and they're obviously rocking the whole time, and the fans and the celebrity, right? The celebrity kind of takes over, and so that, like I said, that really, in this case, it really elevates the Five Little Bitches, because you are less concerned that, as in previous McWhirter, that they're just going to get trapped in the downtown east side, in the grime and the debauchery, and as they're becoming famous, it goes to the next level. So in that regard, I want to talk about, first, style. Let's just talk about the book construction itself. The way, this is an important photograph on the back. Whoever set that up did a very good job of this, where it actually is the characters. So that really kind of, the book construction almost transcends into a graphic novel, a comic book. So there's lots of entire pages. Again, this is Coupland-esque. Entire pages of art, or she has lyrics from the songs, obviously the songs that they're writing, and those are poetic sequences. This very significant art piece there describing one of the characters. So again, it really does transition, and it has this. Here's a great one about one of the lyrics for one of the songs. So yeah, so the critics, the ABC Book World critics, are saying it's not really. It's different in Coupland. Well, content-wise perhaps, but stylistically, maybe we could say not so much. At least certainly the art style, which is very important. Here's another. This is Anvil Press who did this, I should add, and like I said, they did a really fantastic job. It almost is becoming like a graphic novel, reminded of Watchmen or something like that. So just brilliantly done in that regard. So this is a beautiful book. Again, really sketchy. Here's the Freudian slips. It really captures, the insanity, the madness that's going on, and the debauchery. There's entire pictures of just urinals and these inside of these horrible clubs that these guys are headlining at. Not headline, but they're the what do you call it? Opening band for it's a band called Fire Chicken, which is So again, all these names are certainly very true to life and really capture the underground punk rock scene. Okay, so that's the structure of this, the aesthetics of it, if you will. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the plot. What happens, right? So like I say, it starts off with the tale of these two girls, Maxine and Rosie, and they're both, kind of like sexy, young, dumb, just want to party all the time. The party girls, and they, one of them goes off. Rosie goes off into like the route of she's hotter. She goes off in the route of like pornography, and real insane debauchery. Whereas Maxine goes into this, she wants to become, she really from the very beginning, right? She's obsessed. She wants to be a star. She's the front man. She's got star power and vocals, and she wants to become a celebrity. So she's trying to do that somehow, but has been unable to do it so far because she hasn't had the band. And the team building thing is really important here. So Rosie is like an important character because she definitely is she becomes the opposite of Maxine. I'll tell you what happens. Rosie eventually meets a boy she falls in love with, and they have a sort of family. They have kids, and so she's going off in the ex-porn star is going off in a direction where she's now become respectable. Whereas Maxine takes the opposite route later on in her life. She's like 35, I think, and is becoming, can't stop partying. Wants to get all the boys and have the fans and all that. It wants to stardom. So they go off in different directions, but they start together, and that's significant because you can clearly see that they are like, this is a thing, again, McWhirter very good at doing these family tales. She likes brothers and sisters and how their lives change and split up, and she likes to, she's able to insert those characterizations in an almost Cormac McCarthy-like way where just like, a name drop is enough, or like one sentence will tell you a lot about the character just because it sounds like, my brother did this, or that's my sister. And like Nadine is one of these characters, Squeaky's sister, and like so that knowing that there's a family background there, really like again gives it depth and makes you want to know more about the characters. Okay, so that's Maxine and Rosie. And Maxine's working for this Freudian Slips, this weird antique store, kind of a fashion antique store. And they're going out to the pubs all the time. And she meets this drummer from Quebec called Squeaky. And so, like, Squeaky is, like a firecracker, but she's, like the name implies, she's like small girl. So she's like a little more self-conscious. And she had all these brothers growing up, 3 brothers growing up. And so that gives her this perspective on male psychodynamics and social dynamics as well, which is important because I expect McWhirter has personal experience in this regard, but that that differentiate from the bitches, the female psychodynamics, which are like, as you can imagine, they're just eventually they're always at each other's throats, and there's just the drama is off the charts, which is clearly done intentionally. It's again the all female band, punk rock band, they're crazy girls, right? It's almost like I was gonna say it's like a David Cross component to that. So anyway, okay, so they meet Squeaky, who's the drummer. Squeaky knows, I think it's Fanta, who is like the most level-headed of the groups, German, older, 37, and is the drummer, the guitarist, lead guitarist, and she is brought into this to put this band together. They still need a bass player, who is this girl, a very young 21-year-old Kitty Domingo. And I think Kitty is one of the outstanding characters in the story because she is absolutely like nuts. Like and it just takes it to this other level that it really stands out in the second half of the story when you're worried about what's going to happen to her because it's so crazy. Madhouse, stuff. I've never seen the C word used so many times in a novel, so that's great, and is again very true to life, very accurate to some real life type drug addicts, if you will, rockers, young rockers, right? Party girls. Okay, so they get together and now they've got this crew and they form the band. Like I said, now Rosie, so the fifth bitch, Rosie has they want her to manage the band, but because Maxine has this like inferiority complex about Rosie, she cuts her out of the loop, and then this results in Fanta, who is like I said, the eldest and most like level-headed one, doing all the work, and that she becomes like overworked, and then she's breaking down, and she's a little more intellectual as well, and so she's concerned about the direction the band is taking because they're becoming, as they are going on this tour with Fire Chicken, which is like a lot of fun for them. They're on the road in the van and at the pit stops and these super sketchy Albertan, Saskatchewan, clubs and bars, like, booze dens. But so Fanta would hope that she could use like the band, and she doesn't necessarily have to. She could, her life is complete enough that she doesn't necessarily want the celebrity or the stardom. And in the story, this comes across very clearly because whenever the other three of them go out to go partying like maniacs, Fanta will pack everything up responsibly and go back to the hotel and crash it, get some sleep, get some rest, get ready for the next event. Whereas meanwhile, like I say, it just becomes Kitty Domingo starts taking over the story, and she's competing with like Maxine for who can be the craziest, and it's just like spiraling out of control. Now, meanwhile, Squeaky falls in love with one of the lead frontmen for. Fire Chicken, and she has like the most compelling romance story in the, component of the story, because it's visceral and they're like really in love with each other, and unlike other male characters in this Frankie Sparrow character, unlike other male characters in McWhirter stories, he sticks around and isn't just a boy toy who's there to kind of just like get drugs off of and get cheap sex with and then get blown out instantly. There's a recurring tagline that Maxine has where she tells her lovers, I'm warning you, this will never happen again. Don't, etc. Like, so the ruthlessness, that female, ruthlessness is really important. But McWhirter's so good at this because, like I said, I think she has this, down to earth, Hemingway, Coupland, kind of like background, McCarthy even, where she's sympathetic to the male stupidity and, but also camaraderie and like lack of drama, knowing that that's the opposite of this madhouse that the women construct. And I find that endearing because, and by the way, this is told from a third person, God, omniscient third person narrator perspective, which is really important because this would not work as a first person story because you need to be able to follow, especially in these like crazy parties, you need to be able to follow what the characters are doing. And if one person is trying to tell it, which I have done this before in my novel Cascadia, it just becomes, you have to get so embedded in the first person narrative that you can't tell the whole story. And in some cases in this, you need to. So third person perspective is really important. And again, McWhirter likes to play with time. She likes to go back and tell you, she'll stop the narrative and go tell you about something that happened in their character's past. Like they thought of something that reminded them of something that happened when they were younger, and she wants to tell that story when they were at school, or when living on the logging camp, or was working as a dishwasher, in the downtown east side. I was going to read this like great quote. I thought this was so perfect. Yeah, because I've been a dishwasher in the downtown east side. I can tell you from personal experience. This is how it is. She's talking about. Let's see here. Yeah, Fanta and Squeaky. Squeaky and tell a smile from her is a rare and bright thing. There is gravity to Fanta that makes her seem like a woman, difficult to impress, but they both sense a common understanding from working years alongside the cooks and busboys that secretly run the city. They're not the kind of girls who carry tiny dogs to brunch or discuss celebrity divorces. That's obviously a dig at Candace Bushnell. So, and that's very true. The subaltern component is critical in this, and you would expect this from somebody specializing in downtown east side poetry and literature. She has many moments like that. Those are again they remind me of McCarthy, where it's just a quick reference, but it like a sentence or two, but it tells you a lot and really gets. Pynchon does this as well. Kind of like gets to the core of the characters, and these are things. And again, so it would be easy if there were only a couple moments like that in the whole book to overlook them, but because there's so many of them, and the prose is so well constructed, the variability of the prose is important. Like it's always fresh, and the dialogue as well. That you are expecting them. You're expecting those kind of moments, and she delivers. McWhirter really does deliver in that regard. I'll give you another one here. This is one of my favorite ones when she's doing, like I said, this is like a David Cross sketch. She's doing the band is doing an interview. They're becoming famous. They've done this American tour. They've done the Canadian tour. They're doing the American tour, and they're becoming a little famous now. They've got their album, which is called Born with Bush, which is a clever, album title, by the way, which they parody, socio-political parody. The title of the tracks also reflect this. The tracks on the album: Bitches Don't Do Dishes, GHBOD, and whatever Trevor. Like there's this innocuous, cynical component to it that you would expect from punk rockers. Okay, but so like I said, Fanta is the more level-headed one, and is like kind of a classic feminist, and she wants to really, she would prefer to politicize things a little bit more, but she can never do this because these people that they're dealing with are so superficial that they like will cut her off. So anyway, this is a scene where they're doing an interview with this horrible DJ. Hey, this is Snack Davies, and today on the morning show we're talking to Wet Leather, a hot new band from Vancouver, Canada. And if I may say, it's a pleasure to see four lovely ladies here this morning. Yes, that's right. For those of you who don't know, Wet Leather is a rock and roll quartet of women. Whoa! Okay, ladies, just a few questions before we play your songs. What's it like being in a girl band? And Kitty, like I said, who's the craziest one, says, it's like being in a boy band with menstruates. Maxine, do you ask them that question? Fanta, it's a constant reaction to the misogyny that masquerades as rock and roll tenants. Whoa, we got a live one here. Squeaky, Snack, is that your real name? Now, girls, this is your first time touring America. What's it like for you here? Fanta, I'm glad you asked that. I used to think this was a country of killers, all that power and arrogance. But that's who you are politically, not as individuals. Okay, for those of you just tuning in, this is Wet Leather with the first single from their debut album, Ho Ho, Born with Bush. Ho Ho Ho, this is Whatever Trevor. They cuss to the song and they take off their earphones. You girls are on fire, hot. Sure, like a case of barley-contained crabs, Fanta says dryly. She pushes the microphone away. I'm never doing this again. It's a really great scene and like tells you so much about, the superficiality of the DJ, radio industry, music industry itself, and the characters, how they are reflecting on their emerging celebrity. They meet this guy, Fire Chicken, introduces Frankie Sparrow, who's, like I said, in love with Squeaky, introduces them to this producer with Scat Records, who does punk, and his name's Eddie, and he's like, archetypal OG, uber punk, and but serious businessman, and wants to produce them, cuts them a contract. Fanta, of course, is skeptical about the contract, but the girls are excited and overwhelmed, and Maxine is scared that she's getting too old, and she wants the celebrity now, so they sign the contract. They go produce the album. That's brilliantly written and believable, and then puts them on these tours. However, there's some pushback, and they start getting famous. Like I said, they get on the radio, and I was going to, the New York thing I think I already showed. Like this here, this is part of the American tour, the New York bit, and this is so brilliant. So the van, but you can see they've got the Wet Leather pins there, which is a nice detail. That's sort of the merchandising that's happening, behind the scenes. So it's an insight into the music industry itself and what that does to people. And again, the burnout is a critical component of this as the tours go on, especially then they go on this European tour, and that's I will let you know, that's a disaster for them, and reflects. Here's one of the pictures of just the toilet, and again, art piece reflects the burnout that they're experiencing, because this is so exhausting, that this tour schedule where you're constantly partying, constantly boozing, but then have to perform, and the fans have expectations, but maybe the band isn't up to it that day, or so the tensions are building, and like I said, everyone's on these super one night stand relationships, and they're, except for Squeaky. And as I mentioned, Rosie, who, like I said, she reappears later on, but she's this outlier satellite of the main group, who really represents the life that the women, some of them, ultimately begin to desire as their younger party girl selves burn out. And so, like I said, the Kitty Domingo character is so critical in the second half of the novel, and just has these just maddening, and hilarious sentence structures, which are unbelievably insulting. I don't even really want to read them because it's almost too much for YouTube. But so she's going and is she becomes when they go to New York, Kitty becomes infatuated with the city, and she can't believe she's starstruck. She's got the Jay McInerney, Bret Easton Ellis, Bright Lights Big City, American Psycho mentality, and just wants to go fight everybody and drink everything and do all the heroin and all the coke. And so that again becomes. But it's becoming too much for the band. She's her in madness, is becoming legendary, and she starts making like more mistakes, and she's too hammered to do the shows. And like I said, this is killing Fanta, who wants to take it in a more serious direction. And it's even annoying Maxine, because Maxine has, like, she considers herself the professional frontman, star, singer, and Kitty's like fucking this up because it's just so insane, which really is, like I say, turbocharged. This is another good sentence here. Yeah. Squeaky tries to figure out what time it is back in Vancouver. It's hard to find a phone, a helpful operator, or the country code. She heads down the street and plugs zeros into a payphone. Kitty follows along and sings in a pinched, Buzzcocks falsetto, slapping her hands against her thighs. No ass, no pants, looking shitty walking down the Strasse. Kitty hasn't called home, not to anyone, even her mother, even once. So there's, again, really tells you a lot in that sentence what's going on. So eventually, of course, what happens is the band breaks up. Kitty goes mad. Heads off to a commune where she gets clean, more or less. This commune thing I said, very Coupland-esque trope. There's the rise of Kitty Domingo. So at first, of course, she hates it, but then as she sobers up, she starts to realize that there may be more to life than just endlessly partying and making fun of boys and taking advantage of them, etc. Fanta disappears because, like I said, she's had it. She doesn't believe in them anymore and thinks that the madness has gone too far, which it has. Maxine becomes like washed up, and she's the archetype of the washed up rock star, and is terrified of losing her youth and her looks, and is like I said, embittered because Rosie has now the successful life with her husband, basically, and a kid, Mabel, and so they're she's jealous of that family connection, and so she's totally washed up and like loses it. So the band is imploding. Like I said, Squeaky is now just, all she does is she moves in with her boyfriend, and they start like a restaurant. This is again classic downtown East Side, Hell's Kitchen scenario. They got the Irish bar and with the culinary scenes, and the people are doing weddings there. So she's they're having different levels of success and like getting their lives together, except for Maxine. And so which is wrapping up the story now, because it's gone full circle from the start where, like I said, split from the Maxine Rosie story at the beginning of this, and then that splits off. And then the other characters get in, the madness increases. Now they're coming back together at the very end where they've exhausted their party thing, and they're on to something. They need something else, and they want to have real lives and do real things, and in a less insane, and less superficial way, and which is again the Coupland kind of ending, and McWhirter flirts with this. It wasn't the ending I expected from the Dirtbags, because the Dirtbags is the unrepentant spider tale. So that, drug addiction, madness, train spotting, wreck fest. And so that ending is darker and bleaker. And I was, and McWhirter was going there, like I was like, oh my, what's going to happen to some of these characters? A scene where Kitty Domingo, they're out in L.A., I think it is, and like Kitty Domingo's out in the ocean surf, but she can't swim, so she almost like drowns in the surf. You're like, oh my god, look at where this is going to go. But it doesn't go there. I will tell you, in the end, it does not go there. And I think because McWhirter ultimately likes these characters a lot and wants them to succeed, and so she brings it back together, and it ends with the band. The band gets back together and reunites, and they're off, to their next adventure. Different people, they've changed. There's real like character learning from the beginning, and so I don't want to completely spoil it. I'll wrap it up there. I'm really looking forward to McWhirter's next novel. It's been 14 years since the Real Mackenzie's tour and the Wet Leather, Five Little Bitches, and the Dirtbags. It's been even longer. So she's got this new novel coming out this year. It's like September. It's called Capper, and it's purports to be a story about now an older woman who is embittered by her life in the downtown East Side, presumably, and is now and a connection with these drug dealers and mobsters, gangsters, whatever, and is looking for revenge or something. So that sounds like a really good move from McWhirter, and a departure from the party girl scene, which, like I said, McWhirter is one of the best at this, but now, like I say, she's done that. It's been done, and it's time to move on to something else. So I'm really looking forward to seeing her next novel, and I can highly recommend all of McWhirter's work. Canadian author, she, like Vancouver, Pacific Northwest, excellent, up there with these greats who I've mentioned throughout this review. So yeah, stay tuned and go read some Theresa McWhirter, guys.